district attorney might be a resource to help you. A state legislator office could be a resource to provide some leverage to help you. There are other advocates. Obviously, lawyers are available, but it's not HCD. So I just want to make sure we understand like the interplay between these three, sets of laws. What I wanted to talk about today, and I'm going to go through this as quick as I can because it will hit some of the questions, but I also want to leave a lot of time for Q&A about these subject matters that you were asking about earlier, as well as I'm sure others. I want to talk about rules and regulations, because rather than just do like an MRL training course and try to jam it into an hour, I'm thinking we're getting so many questions right now, and your other great leaders about rules and regulations in parks. Did everybody pick up the handouts on the table about rules and regulations? There's 3 of them back there. These are articles that I've written over the years. One's called The Nuts and Bolts of Park Rules and Regulations, Part 1. And then there's Part 2. And then there's another 2-page handout from what we call the GSMOL. That's the Golden State Manufactured Homeowners Education Fund. So you know what that stands for. That's the nonprofit that GSMOL formed about 10 years ago. And that's about how to respond to 7-day notices. So I'm going to do an overview of this, and then I'm going to segue into some of the other questions that were asked of Mr. Hoopman, and then we'll open it up, okay? Any questions fair game today? If you just hold them for now, and I'll just say, when you ask me a question, try to be as succinct as you can. Because if it takes 5 minutes to unspool a big legal issue, the people on Zoom are going to fall asleep or not be able to hear it. I will be available after I join Santa Maria for a little bit. I'll be available out here in the courtyard after 2:30 if you want to come out and ask a specific question that has no life. So a few people are still out there getting their forms. But rules and regulations, I'm just going to say rules from now on so we know what we're talking about. You live in high-density, multiple residential properties. And it certainly makes sense, doesn't it, that we need to have rules about how people are going to conduct themselves on these properties. And you don't own the land, the park owner owns the land. So the park owner is going to say, I should be the one to determine how my property is going to operate. And that's fine in concept. The thing we have to always remember is residents don't have literal power to enact rules in your parks. And certainly your homeowners, you own your structure, but the way the law is set up, the park owner has unilateral ability to adopt rules and regulations. So then we have a number of questions, and it's on page 1 of the Nuts and Bolts handout, that are going to pop up, they're going to arise because we're going to have this kind of conflict, right, between the park owners, right, as the landowner to enact these, but you live there, and you're concerned about, maintenance of homes and an orderly operation of the park, but what if you feel these rules are going too far, right, they're just going too far. And so a lot of questions, pop up. What makes a rule legal? Can the park owner enforce a rule? How does enforcement occur? What procedure do they use to amend a rule? And when does the amendment take effect? Do they have an opportunity or an obligation legally to meet with you before they amend park rules? Are any rules void on their face? Can you make a park owner enforce rules? Can they be retroactively enforced? And really it boils down to one critical word: reasonable. As I'm fond of saying, if I 10 of you up here right now, and I said, please give me a definition of the word reasonable, from 10 people, how many answers would I get?
10.
Wrong. 11. At least 11. In the mobile home residency law, there's no section that specifically describes what can or can't be in rules. The check and balance in your favor is found in 798.56 subsection D as in dog. 79856 is a section, folks, that enumerates the 7 reasons that you can be terminated. Again, a lot of this is in the handouts, for you to take those as well. Those 7 reasons include failure to follow a reasonable rule or regulation of the park. What that sentence says to us is, if you fail to follow an unreasonable rule, you can't be evicted, which means a park owner cannot enforce an unreasonable rule. What's reasonable? Great question. The more time goes on, the more I'm wondering about a legislative amendment to this code that maybe begins to unpack this in more detail. But as my article says, about page 1 of this part 1, what I think the 3 things that I've kind of thought about is, what's the purpose of the rule? Is there a legitimate purpose? If the rule says no speeding in the park, is that a legitimate purpose? If the rule says no loud music after 10 p.m., is that a legitimate purpose? Or you can't grow marijuana in your backyard, is that a legitimate purpose? Number 2, can the homeowner understand the rule? Is it capable of being understood so that people can follow it? There are some park rules that you look at it and go, I don't even know what this means. If it can't be understood, there are some park rules that you look at it and go, I don't even know what this means. If it can't be understood by the average reasonable man or person, we question whether it's reasonable. There are areas of the law, by the way, in different areas of the law that use the word reasonable, and I just used one of them. In criminal law, I learned in law school, there's a thing called TARM, the average reasonable man. And it's a standard that is applied in criminal law context about whether conduct is rational or reasonable. The third thing would be, what's the cost of compliance? What's it going to cost a homeowner money-wise to comply with the rule or time-wise to comply with the rule? Those are the 3 things that I typically look at if somebody sends me a rule that says, yeah, it says here I got to do this. Can they enforce this or not? Now, a lot of times that's going to be a question for the courts. There may be situations where we know just from a reported case or from a situation, a scenario that we've seen repeating itself, well, this is pretty clearly we have a precedent that it's not